Okay, so like, it's 5 days out from video release, and I'm fresh out of hook ideas. Enjoy the review on Turnabout Memories, I guess? Turnabout Memories is the series' first flashback case, with it being Mia's second case, with her first being played later in this game. But for now, this case. Mia, after a year out of defending clients, takes a case where the defendant is current protagonist of the game's Phoenix Wright, and Marvin Grossberg acts as Mia's assistant. Of course, following the tradition of the games, Winston Payne opens as the quote-unquote rookie killer, with the game doing a decent job of introducing a new player, albeit not as good as the first game, whilst also not isolating returning players, with the introduction of some key characters for the game. The other key characters of the case would be the victim Doug Swallow and witness Dahlia Hawthorne, as well as the judge, who you know is just kind of vibing. Phoenix in this case is in his clueless era. He has such blind faith in his girlfriend Dahlia, and because of that, can be really annoying as a character, which, if this is your first case of the series, I can imagine is kind of confusing. With that said, they don't sour his character to the point of disliking him, which does make the defense, Mia, make sense in terms of wanting to help him. Speaking of Mia, it's nice to get to see a different side of her compared to the confident leader she is portrayed as for much of Phoenix's journey. It adds some traits to a character which we've only ever seen from the third person, which is nice and something they could have done better when introducing Athena and to a lesser extent Apollo, but those two are stories for another day. Doug Swallow is a chemistry student, and that's about as much as we get out of his character. And earlier versions of Prosecutor Payne and Marvin Grossberg provide a little character depth, though I could go without Grossberg's constant yapping about his hemorrhoids. Dahlia is pure perfection in terms of one of these first case villains. Her character is much like April May's, where she is a pretty looking girl who has a less than savoury second side to her. But unlike May, she holds her character way better, and in a way that still makes her likeable, despite what she's done and what you learn throughout this game. She's good at lying, but not in the Von Karma way where it's impossible to disprove, but instead she has a normally competent reasoning, but is just disproven by her inconsistencies. Dahlia is also shown to have a connection to Mia through a previous case in the dialogue, which shows the natures of both the prosecution and the witness. Personally, I think this case is the second best opening case besides Turnabout Trump, though that doesn't mean I have any gripes with it. My main gripe is the case's opening cutscene, which doesn't show that it's a flashback case. Whilst in current day it's quite easy to know this, and there is a post-monologue, something in the intro would have helped returning players in the early 2000s understand the games better. And whilst I can understand it's a small gripe with an otherwise model opening case, the story is something I understood better after playing these games twice, which may speak to my ignorance, but I don't think games should have to be played through multiple times to understand small stuff like flashbacks. And it would have helped show that Phoenix in the hospital bed, now with the opening scene on his laptop. Again, it's probably a stretch to call this an active negative, especially since the trilogy was made for the GBA, which probably couldn't handle another opening cutscene with the rest of them in there, but it's still an issue for me personally. As for other negatives, Payne is kind of a bore and his smugness is painful at times, and Grossberg's thing again, I really don't need to mention that. Despite the negatives, I would still call this one of the best opening cases, with only Turnabout Trump above it and the first Turnabout slightly below it. I'd give it 3 out of 5 attorney badges. Oh, and I have to commend the Trials and Tribulations soundtrack. Whilst to me it's not as good as the first game, it is miles better than Justice for All and every later game in the series. I don't count it towards the scores, as that would be unfair for some cases, but I feel the quality of it should be mentioned. With all that said, I appreciate those who made it through until the end. Feel free to interact with the video or check out my socials, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!